Hello and welcome everyone. I am your host Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, space weather guy, your cosmic bro, here to help you understand what is happening on the Earth energetically, with the solar system, and more. We've just recently had some solar activity. We've had a sequence of M-class flares, the strongest being a 6.9 M-class flare. This occurred about a day ago now. I was waiting to see if maybe we would get a little bit of a bigger flare from this sequence. It's certainly still possible, but it has not come in yet. Now, if you're watching this video, I'm just giving you an update as to the current conditions, because this is really a step into understanding the solar activity that we could very potentially have further out in time, meaning the end of 2026, beginning of 2027, and going all the way to the middle of 2032. So I'll explain both of those timelines. If anyone that was following my channel for a while, especially back in 2025, you'll know that I was covering a certain planetary alignment quite closely that we had at the beginning of this year. That was, and I can actually pull this up for you. This was a very notable, rare planetary alignment that we had at the very beginning of the year, and we can simply drag our solar system model here. This is solar system scope. You can play with a version of this online on my website for free at earthevolution.com/energy-analytics. And here you see this alignment. This is very, very rare. Last time we had this sort of alignment, I believe it was 1936. And because of this alignment and a lot of historic factors, I was forecasting for about a year, right? You can go all the way back to, I think, the end of 2024, but certainly beginning of 2025. We were talking about this for like at least a year, not every day, but to a reasonable degree, about how this could really trigger some significant solar activity, like potentially Carrington level. That's effectively what we saw. We saw a massive sequence of solar flares after this occurred, and it was really around the 19th of January. We also had tons in the beginning of February too, but really the 19th of January we saw some huge impact. The magnetic field went up to 91 nanotesla, which is ridiculous. We'll talk about that more later. And it was a near Carrington level impact, super, super fast. But it did not have the magnetic field polarity needed to really trigger a significant geomagnetic storm on Earth, which could have disrupted technology to a huge degree, like a massive degree, like satellite failures, power grid failures. The thing that a lot of people are worried about, we had a very close call in July of 2012, very close call. That's connected into some of these planetary alignments I've been discussing. I'll talk about that more in just a little bit. But this was another one of these very close calls. And because the magnetic field of the solar storm was such that it didn't connect easily to Earth's magnetic field for the duration, the main duration of the event, we effectively got spared from a trial run of, okay, what does a really big solar storm impact look like? Because again, the magnetic field strength at 90 nanotesla is insane. That's, I mean, maybe the strongest storm ever recorded, at least with modern instrumentation. The 2024 storm that we had, May 10th to the 12th, the Gannon storm, the Mother's Day storm, magnetic field went up to, I think, 60 nanotesla, or maybe even like 73, but every 10 that you go up, it really pushes in so much deeper to Earth's magnetic field. So we had a very close call with this planetary geometry. We have some significant planetary geometry coming up that could provoke some significant solar activity end of 2026, beginning of 2027, and also the middle of 2023. So that's what we are going to discuss today. It's quite a topic, but we will go through it as best as possible. And yeah, hello and welcome. I'm your host, Stefan Burns. Now, just FYI, if you're noticing this thing on my head, I hit myself in the gym doing some calisthenics. I was doing some elbow levers. Don't worry about me. I'm fine. But I'll take all the prayers and well wishes that you, if you decide to send them to me, that you decide to send. But yes, I'm fine. Things happen. We're all human. Okay, so we've had this sequence of solar flares. Let's look at it with our X-ray flux here. Pull this up. And here we see 4 M-class flares, also some C-class flares. This is our C-class zone, M-class zone, X-class zone. Really big flares are going to come in this X-class zone, like double X, basically like 10.0 plus. This was not an X-class flare that we had yesterday on the solstice, but this was a significant flare from a sunspot rotating in, and it didn't launch out a big coronal mass ejection. So if you go back really quick, this sunspot group right here, 4473, still has the majority of its plasma. And you see it's just kind of pumping. Now it's been quiet for a longer duration than was the spacing for any of the other flares that occurred. So it may have been the full sequence, but it also could be just waiting simply to go Earth center and direct. Now the interesting thing to note with this is that there is an even bigger sunspot following behind 4473, and it will be rotating onto the Earth-facing side of the sun in about a day. And this is all illustrative for potentially the sort of sequences that we see with solar activity and planetary alignments, like I'm going to discuss with the end of this year in 2032, okay? So this is like your kind of intro into the subject. So we have this other sunspot falling behind. We can check that one out right here, and we'll see the rapid growth of that. Well, currently that is in alignment, well, it was in alignment with Jupiter. And if you look through the record, and we're going to do this, if you look through the record of big events, Jupiter is almost always implicated. Almost every single time. Like I think there's only maybe one time on here where Jupiter's not really participating in an obvious way. So something about Jupiter and its magnetic field, it has an opposite magnetic field to ours. That polarity seems very significant, and we see evidence with that with this event that occurred at the beginning of the year, 2026, January 19th, which was insane. Actually, I can pull up a video for you of some of the aurora that we saw from that. Your mind may absolutely melt from this. This was taken by some, I think by some Lake Michigan, like storm chasers or weather crew, something like that. This is literally insane. This is the aurora that we had with that superstorm. And look at the pulsing of the aurora. I mean, I'm new to this, but I've never seen anything like this in terms of footage. I've gone through a lot of the events. Here we see this was occurring on the 21st of January, right? So yeah, there can be, and that was not a full impact. If this isn't even a full impact, what does a full impact look like? How does that affect our satellites, which A, will experience more drag as the atmosphere expands out and now is really interacting with them, and also how it will affect the electronics. You get this deep dielectric charging, you get short circuits, and well, you get more satellite failures in general during geomagnetic storms. Starlink, the largest satellite constellation, now has more than 10,000 in orbit. In 6 months, they're going to have even more. And in 2032, there's probably going to be tens of thousands of these satellites. Kessler syndrome, if you don't know, is the idea that one satellite will start a chain reaction, or enough of them, if they start to interact with each other and create debris traveling at hypersonic speeds relative to each other, can create this cascade where everything gets wiped out. So that's a serious thing, especially when we're putting more and more of our communications and just networking infrastructure in space. And then you have the actual impact, for example, of a Carrington event, how that perhaps could just trigger technology to get fried, power grids and other systems. We can look at a Carrington level impact right here, just to give you a sense. This is an animation, simulation, but the magnetic field just gets completely compressed. And this happened, the Carrington Event, in 1859. Telegraph stations, there was chaos. Some stations like caught fire. There's reports that there were lines that were getting melted. Other stations were able to unplug their batteries and still continue to talk to each other because the geomagnetically induced currents are strong enough to relay the signal. So it was crazy what was happening. In 1921, a similar event happened where the geomagnetically induced currents, because you have these powerful electric currents in the upper atmosphere, they were induced into the rail lines in New York. And the voltage difference was so strong that it was reported that, touching one of those rails that was electrified perhaps could have killed someone. Like the shock of it is like, I think 800, 900, 1,000 watts. Or sorry, not watts, volts. Your wall outlet in the United States is 120. In Europe, it's 220 or 240, right? So that's a good jolt. Now the current also matters, but the current's high, then now you have a problem. Even where your head is, a good example of that is where you're standing. Let's say you're 6 feet tall. Where you're standing, there's about 250 volts of atmospheric potential, but the air is so resistive that you don't get shocked. Well, if all of a sudden it was very conductive up here, you get this equalization and you get shocked with 250 volts. So think 800 volts, 1,000 volts. Big deal. So we have these sort of forces and factors at play. We have this large sunspot group that is soon to rotate into view just in the next like 48 hours, basically 24 hours as I'm filming this, but it's going to do Earth-facing transit in 7 days. It will be aligned with us and we'll see what happens then. But we've already seen some activity from it, some of it quite significant. If you go back to our solar system scope here, we will see one reason I think why this has been the case. So go here and you'll notice that we have this grouping of planets. There's Mercury, Venus, and Jupiter. All of them are visible in the night sky right now. We just had a Venus-Jupiter alignment there on the 8th and on the 9th. Then we had this perfect occlusion, occultation of Venus by the moon there on the 17th. We've had some very significant planetary alignments. We had a Mercury-Cassini before this right here that was exactly crossing behind the sun. Sometimes it's above or below the ecliptic plane. That one was exactly behind. So we're in this sequence now that started it actually started back here with this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, 20th of February approximately. See right there? The Saturn-Neptune conjunction. But it's continuing all now, and it really gets going pretty wild at the end of this year, beginning of next year. But what happens is right now, we are having these sunspots which are showing activity as they cross past Jupiter, and then we have these two other planets which are also interacting with them, and then boom, we're on the fiery line, and you'll notice right now at least, nothing is on the other side. All the other planets are over here in this basket configuration, all separated by sextiles, and Earth there is all by itself. This is a historic planetary geometry that we really don't have any record or knowledge of this having happened before, where Pluto, Neptune, Uranus, and Jupiter all separated exactly by 60 degrees. That's going to be later in July, like mid-July. So we've been having this sequence of very notable planetary geometry going back to 2012, which I'll touch on in a second. But first, I want to show you this right here, which is a demonstration of how Mercury can trigger solar activity. So we're going to turn myself off. You'll see on the left side a coronagraph view, and that bright point of light that's moving is the planet Mercury on the far side of the sun. So you have a Earth-Sun alignment, and Mercury is behind it, and that bright cluster of stars you see right there that lines up with the sun right at that moment, that is the Pleiades star cluster. So you'll notice that there's quite a bit of activity as Mercury gets close to the sun, right there, and does this Cazimi, and then it cools off again as it moves further away. Well, look at the other side, and this time I'll turn myself on. Right here is far side imagery. This is exactly opposite the Earth. Look at this mega sunspot group that just rapidly forms. Out of basically nothing, instantaneously becomes a huge sunspot. Like this thing's crazy. And then it actually dies out pretty quick. Actually kind of died out. Here's the planetary geometry for the 14th of May. We see Mercury exactly there, superior conjunction. In general, we see heightened solar activity during superior conjunctions. I've been talking about that for, many months now, years now. This was a perfect example, not only with some of the activity that we saw, but also with this mega sunspot that formed just within like 24, 48 hours of that cazimi happening exactly. And that cazimi at superior conjunction Mercury also coincided with its perihelion. So Mercury's closest approach to the sun. Mercury has a magnetic field. Here we see the magnetic field of the planets that have magnetic fields. Now, also the moon Ganymede, which orbits Jupiter, has a magnetic field. But if you exclude moons, these are the planets that have intrinsic magnetic fields generated within the planet. So you see Earth, Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Mercury there. Now Mercury's is 1% the strength of Earth's, and Earth's magnetic field is weaker than in Jupiter or Saturn's. We know Jupiter has the strongest magnetic field in the solar system for the planets. Uranus and Neptune should be stronger than Earth's, but we don't have the best data. We only have data from Voyager 1 and 2. And then Saturn's magnetic field is stronger than Earth's, but weaker than Jupiter's. So Mercury, though, has a magnetic field, and it's obviously the planet closest to the sun. So if anything can perturb the close surface magnetic field of the sun, it could be Mercury, especially when it's at perihelion at its closest. And we also have seen data that the magnetic field of the sun over the past few solar cycles has gone closer and closer to the surface. So that's some new data that came out. I have the graphic for it right here. Just let me find it. And this is for solar cycles 23, 22, 23, 24, and 25. Helioseismic data. So by examining helioseismic data, they effectively found out that the magnetic structure of the sun is getting closer and closer to the surface. And so back with solar cycle 23, a lot of the changes were sub 3,000 or greater than 3,000 kilometers, so pretty deep into the sun, as compared to now where they're all confined generally within less than 1,000 kilometers close to the surface. Here we also have some planetary alignments I put up here, and you will see some interesting connections specifically here with Saturn, Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, right there with this big oscillation and low frequency energy. And that's important because we just went through Saturn, Neptune in 2026, and we have the Saturn-Uranus conjunction in 2032. So this is that 2032 event. It's in many aspects the Saturn-Uranus conjunction, but it's more than just that. So we've seen changes to the sun indicating that there's more magnetic field structuring close to the surface, perhaps indicative of the potential for a Carrington event being more possible. I mean, we did just see this crazy impact in January. If I go back here, you will see that data. This is from our new Solar 1 probe. Let me pull this up for you. This really is incredible data. It goes to show you how powerful these impacts can be. So here we have it. We need to go back to January, back to the beginning. Oh, look at that giant spike in the magnetic field. Okay, that is exactly what I'm talking about. This is that near Carrington level solar storm. Now this is where things get interesting, okay? So you see here this spike up to 86.7 nanotesla, and then you also see it reached this high mark of like 90 nanotesla for a long duration of time. Now at the beginning of the storm, right when it came in, and you'll see the velocity just all of a sudden went bonkers on this. It was down at like 200, 300 kilometers per second. All of a sudden it's at 1,000 kilometers per second. That's a fast impact, okay? This isn't the shock wave impact being 1,000 kilometers per second. This is the actual bulk of the storm being 1,000 kilometers per second. And some of this data here, this is Solar 1 data. They were still putting in orbit and everything, so it looks like this velocity data is incorrect. There's actually showing this was just whatever the active spacecraft was. I think I can switch this to Solar 1, see what it gave us. But yeah, we see that Solar 1 had some issues with the data because it starts getting all scrambled over there. So that's why you just keep it on active for whatever the best source was. So we have this initial impact. You see that it's colored purple there. This means the magnetic field was in such a way, the configuration of it was that it could connect easily to Earth's magnetic field. But then you'll notice the majority of this storm here, where it's the strongest for a long duration of time, is the opposite polarity, okay? So not a good connection to Earth's magnetic field. You see that we had a 8.67 kp index. That's a G5 minus geomagnetic storm. But in general, it was a G4 storm with lots of G3 activity. As you can see, this was a bruiser. And you know, few people online were like, oh my God, I can't believe it didn't go negative. What, the aurora would have been so cool. Well, I already showed you that crazy aurora from this. The people that really know this stuff were like, thank God that did not flip negative here, because we could have had a big technological disruption of to some level and degree. Like, we don't know. But I know there are some other people, one of them being well-known space weather woman, she was worried about this. Like, she was like, thank God. And one of her live streams, like, thank God this did not flip negative. So going back here, well, look, here is Earth. Earth's north magnetic poles in the southern hemisphere. The field lines go out and then they go in like this. Jupiter has the opposite. So look at the field lines go, they go out in the northern hemisphere and then go in the southern hemisphere. See how the magnets are flipped for Earth and Jupiter? Well, there appears to be almost like an intelligence with this solar storm that was launched, because you see that Earth was given a little rattle at the beginning. This isn't even that big of a deal compared to like what came here, right? This is the real monster in the storm. This is just the warm-up. Earth immediately got sent to G5 minus levels from the warm-up, and then it flipped into this configuration that we see that would have really been crazy. Now, Earth still got hit with that, but most of it sloughed off because of the magnetic field configuration not really connecting nicely to Earth. Well, if we go back here, let's go back to January, okay? And we see this alignment there. Look at what's behind Earth. Jupiter. So whatever hit Earth hit Jupiter, right? Whatever hit Earth hit Jupiter. So the sun sent off a solar storm, which gave Earth a message, a warning, a heads up, you could call it, and then it actually delivered the main message to Jupiter. And again, there's this thing where Jupiter almost always seems to be, it's almost always there with these big storms. The Carrington Event is another example. We can go back in time to do that. I'll just drag Neptune here. We'll go all the way back to 1859. And we'll look at these later, but let's just do it right now. And we want August and September of 1859. So right about here. Oh, look at this. You have this, and it was really right on the 3rd of September, but the activity started on the 29th of August, okay? But look at this. You have this configuration with Saturn, Mars, Venus, Mercury, and Earth, like that. And that launched a huge solar storm out, just like that, right to Earth. 1859, also see almost Neptune being configured in this in a similar position to where Neptune is today. Okay, you'll notice Uranus there close to the Pleiades, which is very interesting. But that is one, actually this is one that Jupiter is not involved, but let's find another one where Jupiter is. You'll see why Saturn's important here. Again, Saturn being a big magnetic field, and see how all the planets are participating in this. That's kind of the key point here. So we can find one where Jupiter was involved by zooming forward again to 2012. And this was the Carrington Event that missed us. This is the end of July, right around middle end of July, right here. It's 2010. So let's go forward to 2012. Yeah, that'll do it. So right around the 20th, 21st, 22nd of July, I think it's actually, I wrote down specifically, maybe the 23rd. July 23rd, the sun launched off a Carrington level solar storm. We know that because it hit our solar orbiter probe, and the velocity was insane, the magnetic field, the plasma density, everything was insane. Guess where it went? It went exactly to Jupiter. Just like what happened in January of this year, 2026, where it hit Earth and Jupiter, right? Now, the planetary geometry here isn't as crazy as it is for some of them, but we did get that one to launch off. So you don't always need the planetary geometry, but look here. You see Jupiter right on the Pleiades. There's this interesting thing where the Pleiades are often connected to this. The largest interstellar cluster near us, 444 light years away. Super high vibrational energetic stars, right aligned with the ecliptic plane. And more. Now, what happened just before this? Well, we had the transit of Venus just before this. So let me show you that. Now, this is the transit of Mercury right here. But let me pull up the transit of Venus first. So here's the transit of Venus in 2012. This is the 5th and 6th of June. You'll see Venus race across. And we're not going to get another transit of Venus for like 100 plus years. So these don't happen that often. They usually come in clusters. And I'll have to look at the actual data here. So this again was on the 5th and 6th of June 2012, just a little bit more than a month before that Carrington level event, a perfect alignment of Venus with the sun on the ecliptic plane. There was one that occurred on the 8th of June 2004. And before that, you have to go all the way back to 1874 and 1882. Well, I find this interesting because not only do we get this like 1 in 100 something year transit, the next ones will be 2117 and 2125. That also corresponds, 2012, with this supposed new age of humanity. You know, the Mayan calendar stopped. I don't know why it stopped. Did they just stop? Did they stop just because the guy stopped writing? Or is it because they supposed there was a new age beginning then? But it's not just the Mayans, it's also the Hopi. It's a lot of different cultures around the world that were looking at that time frame of 2012-ish for there being some new like rebirth of the cycle of humanity in the world and more. Well, we got this transit, then we had that Carrington event launch out towards Jupiter. Basically, hey, wake up, this can happen. Okay, well, other events have occurred since then. We've recently been in a sequence of events. We had a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 2020. We had a Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in 2020. Then we had a sequence of Jupiter conjunctions with the outer planets. This is Pluto and Neptune in 2022. Then it conjuncted Uranus in 2024. Of course, we have Saturn, Neptune right now, 2026. That's a big one because that occurred on the equinoctial marker, which is very rare. And we have the final big alignment in the sequence coming in 2032. Well, we saw that Mercury had a sun-facing transit here, 11/11/2019. This is all right when things were starting to get a little odd, as you may remember. And the next one will occur in November 2032. So we get this Mercury. It's very fast. You'll see it's very fast. See that right there? You have to watch really like over here, okay? Mercury is very fast, very tiny. Boom. See that? Watch it again. There it is. Just like that. Okay? So one more time. See that? Boom. So we see that these perfect Mercury alignments, at least for Earth facing, are kind of bounding on each side all the significant planetary geometry that we have of the 2020s, which is very significant. Again, historic. We've never seen this sextile arrangement between Pluto, Neptune, Uranus and Jupiter. Like astrologers are looking back, they haven't found it yet. I've been looking back and I haven't found it with my software because there's, they don't, it's hard to go back 10,000 years in these things. So we've just recently gone through a big sequence of planetary geometry. We can look at that right here. Here we see Stellarium. And of course we showed how Mercury was exactly behind the sun in line with the sun on the 15th of May. But let's check that out in Stellarium here. And we go back to the 14th of May, sorry. Here's our Mercury Cazimi. And we're actually going to have to kind of track it more loosely here. Here we are. Mercury is now behind the sun, okay? If I go forward, there's Mercury, or that's going back in time to the 13th. You go to the 14th, there it's directly behind the sun, just like what happened in 11/11/2019, but this time on the other side of the sun. This is where we saw tons of activity, a huge sunspot form, and there it is on the other side. So you can kind of see what I'm getting to. Just a little bit more than a month after that Venus transit, the last I will have in 100 years, we had a Carrington event blast off towards Jupiter, missed us by 7 days. We had this exact Mercury alignment there on May 14th, and we saw this mega sunspot form within 48 hours of that in alignment with it, and Mercury's at its perigee, so it's closest to the sun. Well, all these, and look, it's right on the Pleiades, okay? Again, the Pleiades are very important here, that big, super high energy interstellar cluster. Well, these alignments are they're effectively exactly what the word alignment means. Alignment means we're bringing things into alignment. So if things are out of alignment, then sometimes that can survive for a while. Like with the stock market, for example, it can stay irrational longer than you can stay solvent. But eventually, it reaches alignment. And if there's been over speculation, there will eventually be a crash. That's just how things work. So alignments bring things back to where they should be. This is the original celestial clock. We have our own clock, universal time and everything, but that's, kind of a modern construct to some degree. If we go forward here, we will see now the next alignment that occurred recently in this sequence, Venus and Jupiter. They do this once a year, but this is a check-in for them. Not exactly on top of each other, but it's another alignment of this celestial clock where the energies are equilibrating, you could say. And then if we, let's move them over to maybe the other side here. If we go forward to what just occurred a few days ago, here it is. You see the moon races by. See the moon racing by? Well, here's the 17th. Let's go back just a couple hours. Here it is. Here we see the moon passing directly over Venus in an occultation. The first time since December 7th, I believe, of 2015. Yeah, December 7th of 2015, first time in about 11 years. So here it is. And I saw this myself. I took a photo, I posted it to my X account, but we see the moon directly over Venus. So that's a pretty rare event. And look what's also nearby. You have the Crab Nebula. This is one of the biggest supernovas that have occurred in our recent nearby interstellar space. If you start looking at these planetary alignments and then also interstellar forces and phenomenon, you notice that there's often these alignments on them. Like back in 1052, this supernova occurred 1054 AD. Back in 1052 AD, we had this crazy alignment all over it. Though I'm not sure this is actually the Crab Nebula. One second, I may have to take that back. I want to be accurate. I don't want to just make stuff up. A lot of people just make stuff up. Oh, okay. I was wrong. This is the Crab Nebula. Sorry. But there's the sun. So here okay, so it's still, see how it still works out? It's crazy. Here we have the sun, and this because the Crab Nebula is in Taurus. Here we have the sun almost directly on the Crab Nebula during that Venus moon alignment. And actually, maybe if we go back, we'll see some other interesting things that have occurred there perhaps. Okay, but in general, you get the sense of what I'm talking about. Here is the 14th when we had Mercury Cazimi, right? Look, Venus was, and that was on the Pleiades effectively, and Uranus is also there. I'll pull up Uranus in a second. Here we have Venus exactly on the crab as it relates to its latitude, not longitude, but latitude. And we see Uranus here on the Pleiades. So interesting, right? Even when it's, no matter how you slice it, these relationships keep popping up. So we have another Mercury Cazimi coming up. We have these sunspots rotating through. We could see some really big activity just over the next 2 weeks, okay? So that's your short-term report. Now let's go forward in time because there are other things that have been happening, that are happening. So let's go back to solar system scope. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's look at the alignment that's coming up end of this year. You notice this clustering of planets here, okay? And you have this double inferior conjunction of Mercury and Venus, just like this. Last time we saw this was March of 2025, and just a few days afterwards, we had the magnitude 7.7 that struck Myanmar, Burma, also a huge 1.1 X-class flare. That was actually bigger. That's just the light that we got because it was from the limb of the sun. That was a massive explosion that went off. Then afterwards, we go into this alignment like this, and look at this cross that forms. Mercury right here, just beforehand, doing a superior conjunction, which we see connected to high solar activity. Then that region perhaps could rotate into view right here, where then you get this alignment end of January, and you get Jupiter there. So if something launches towards Earth, it's also going to launch towards Jupiter. And we see Jupiter connected to these events over and over and over. Well, we also see, again, this connection to Pleiades. Uranus is still pretty much on the Pleiades. So that's also showing this resonance. And we have this Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And there, it's actually fairly exact for Jupiter. So no longer is it exact geocentrically, but Jupiter-centrically it is. So that's some interesting planetary geometry. We know that there was a Miyake event in 774. Like a big, this is bigger than a Carrington event, like 10 to 100 times bigger than a Carrington event. So let's go back to 774. Well, again, this time maybe we grab Pluto to do it. We can even grab Eris here to go back to 774. And that was pretty close. Now this notable planetary geometry I found was in June. So let's look at June here. We don't know when it exactly occurred, but it's 774 to 775 AD. Okay. Well, I think you can see this notable planetary geometry pretty easily. Here you have Pluto, Jupiter, Earth, and then on the other side you have Venus, Mars, Neptune. Very similar to what we've been talking about. Okay, Uranus is a little further off. So it's not on the Pleiades for 774. Nothing really is on the Pleiades for 774, but you do see this geometry there. That's quite significant. Similar to what we've had before. This time even Pluto's in it. And as you can see, this right here is in alignment with the center of the galaxy because it's June. So here we have a Fucus, here is Sagittarius. Sorry, this is Scorpius. This is a Fucus. There's Sagittarius. That's the galactic center. So it's just like what we have effectively right now. Not in terms of planetary geometry, but in terms of Earth, the Sun-Earth galactic center alignment, that's what we have right now. But that was a huge, huge, huge event. We can go to 1052, look at that event. And this specifically is May through June, 1052. And look at this alignment that we have. We have Earth, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and not only the Pleiades, but also the Crab Nebula. And this is right around the time of that supernova, which they say was 1054. It's all right there. So you see how these planetary alignments almost portend events that are going to occur near time. Now, we also have another one in 992, another Miyake event, 992. So let me show you that one. Yeah, the Crab Nebula. The Crab Nebula, which is in Taurus. It's not in the constellation of Cancer. So let's go to 992 when there was another Miyake event, another big one. And we'll again drag Eris here because Eris has like a 554-year orbital cycle, making it easy to get there. 992. Now, we don't know when these events occurred specifically, these Miyake events. But we know that they've occurred based on our isotope data. Now, this specifically is May through June. So let's click that. Go to is that the right way? Yeah, here's May through June, 992. And we see just more interesting planetary geometry around this time. Struggling, is this right? 992. Oh, sorry, November 17th, 992. I was about to say, this doesn't look right. Here's November 17th, 992, okay? This is when we had another Miyake event, bigger than a Carrington event, okay? Now, we don't know exactly when, but we see this planetary geometry is very significant. Look, Jupiter on the Pleiades, there's the Earth, and here we have this alignment going off to the side. So you see these bent alignments correspond with these huge events. There's the bent alignment going off like this. Now let's go forward in time. Let's look at 2032, the big 2032 event. I've teased it enough, I think. Let's go forward to 2032. And you'll see this form quite rapidly here. And here it is. Here we have the 2032 event. We have Jupiter, we have Earth, Mercury, Venus, Mars in a line. You'll notice again, fairly close to the galactic center, though not exactly. But look here. Not only do we have Saturn involved, like we did for the Carrington event in this similar configuration, and this in fact is one orbital cycle different than what occurred in January of this year, 2026. Remember that alignment? Well, that's the same alignment, except now Saturn and Uranus being involved. So there they are, and they're actually pretty close to the Crab Nebula because they're aligned a little bit further into Taurus. So that's interesting. Again, massive supernova 1054 AD. So we have this incredible planetary alignment coming up that has this bent configuration, which seems to be an important component of these alignments. Uranus and Saturn doing their conjunction specifically, I think it's the 28th to the 29th of June. This is geocentrically. So as this is occurring, you see that this is exact geocentric alignment at the end of June, and it'll basically still be active, for sure still be active as this alignment really starts to get cooking in July as it relates to the heliocentric planetary geometry. So this looks, just looking at this, as someone who's studied this a lot now, has found these repeating patterns, this looks really serious. Now there is something to note with this though, which is the fact that we may avoid a big deal. We may avoid a big Carrington event disaster if this planetary geometry is to trigger it because of where we are in the solar cycle. Okay, if we go back to 1857 with the Carrington Event, you see solar activity here for solar cycle 10 wasn't really too much different than our solar cycle, a little bit stronger, but in general pretty similar. 1859 right here, we want August, September, we see it's right there during solar maximum. So that one occurred during solar maximum. But we also know 1921 was big. So we can go to 1921. Well, look at 1921. We're at the very end of the descending phase. We're not at solar minimum, but we're getting close. Now you can often get big solar storms during these time frames. Actually I can pull up the data for you right here. So here you see our geostorm occurrence. Now this is data from 1957 to 2018. We see most storms that we've tracked during this time frame have come in during maximum and declining phase. One during the minimum, it was pretty strong too. One during the minimum and 3 here during the ascending phase. So you're much less likely to get one during the ascending phase or the minimum. We see that the overall percentage there is 90%. So 10%, only 10% with this data come in during those quieter phases. But with the ascending phase, if you are, solar minimum doesn't last that long. Let's go back to our graphic here. Solar minimum doesn't last that long, right? We see it really kind of just like bottom out just for a little bit, this is very similar to what happened in 1921, that level, and then it dropped off. So anywhere in this zone is kind of a, I don't want to say danger zone, but basically that's what we're talking about. Now, we are probably going to be in the beginning of an ascending phase in 2032 because we see solar cycle 24, similar to ours, took about 4.5 years. Actually, well, that's solar minimum. So it took like 3 years, 3 to 4 years to get to solar minimum. Okay. Well, we're at this 100 sunspot level right now. We've actually even been a little bit below it. You'll notice for a lot of these solar cycles that once you get to 100 sunspots, it drops off pretty quick. Like the average is like 3 to 4 years or so. Some of them are a little bit longer, but in general, it's like 3 to 4 years. So in 2026 right now, we are there. We're probably going to be bottoming in this solar cycle by around 2029 at the latest. So then that takes us through 2030, and then we're probably ramping up into an ascending phase in 2032, especially in the middle of 2032. We could already be back, depending on the strength of the solar cycle, we could already be back to like 100 sunspots monthly count, which means there's new flux pushing out of the sun. So just because it's 2032 and it is going to be closer to a solar minimum, it's almost certainly not going to be a solar maximum. That'd be very bizarre. We'd have to have this phase go down almost immediately and then start to ramp back up. It would have to be pretty quick. I mean, we've seen it before. We've seen these really fast declines. But as you can see, just going through the record, it's not the most common. Some of them are quite long. If you look right here, like really long descending phase there, but it went into a really weak solar cycle. Typically, but look how fast this ascending phase was. Solar cycle 23 was a behemoth. It just shot straight up. So we could see something like that in solar cycle 26. It's certainly possible. But this could be the one thing that effectively maybe nullifies this planetary geometry that we have coming up in 2032. But first we need to get through what we have coming up in the end of this year and the beginning of next year. We can look at it again one more time. Going forward, we get this perfect cross configuration, and we see this clustering of planets there, and Jupiter is in that position behind the Earth, which we see for almost all the important times, the Miyake events in particular, but also 2012, Jupiter, it was launched out towards Jupiter. What has occurred this year? Jupiter is always in some significant position. And we see Uranus there still on the Pleiades there at the beginning of 2027. So this looks very critical. This planetary geometry right here looks very critical. And I think we could see something very big happen then. It's certainly possible. And I mentioned again how these planetary alignments, they really are the true clock that everything runs on. Well, if we go back here to our transit of Mercury, again, this is 2011 or 2019, November, right before all these planetary alignments occurred. The next one that we have coming up Earth facing is at November 2032, almost like it's taking us through a whole sequence at the start and at the end. So very interesting. And then when we saw this Venus transit in 2012, that like was kicking off this whole sequence with that Carrington event shot out just a little bit more than a month afterwards towards Jupiter. So who knows what's going to happen? That's really, it's anyone's guess. But in terms of the study of planetary geometry and solar activity, if you look through the record like we just did, and there's a few other, there's some other things too I could show you. But in general, we see these repeating characteristics, and we have data and trends for all this stuff, and what we have coming up checks a lot of those boxes, especially 2032, other than the fact that we'll probably be in the ascending phase of a solar cycle in 2032. I will be traveling tomorrow. So I may release a video tomorrow, I may not. Everything should be fine. Just letting you guys know, and I'll be not my normal location. So I hope to release videos just like I normally do in live stream, but just letting you know that. I know we got some super thanks to come in. I wasn't going to originally do a chat because I actually need to pack and things, and it's late. But let's just quickly go through these. Dan Fulgum, yeah, it doesn't really fit tonight, but if you want to research more into that yourself, you can do so. Thank you for the super thanks. And Justin Levitt, thank you for the super thanks as well. Pumpkin Spice, Nom Nom, I love it. Thank you. And sending you love and peace as well here from the United States. Thank you, Nancy. Scott MC, what's your view on global expansion tectonics? Well, there's some people that think they have this idea called Earth expansion, and that, the Earth is expanding, but they have it like 250 million years ago. All the continents were wedged together, and there was no oceanic plate. Now it's expanded to where it is. I don't think that's the case, but I could see how Earth maybe has expanded 5% over time. Like there's a very slow growth of expansion, because if you have certain processes occurring in the core and the outer core, like inner outer core, that is causing there to be phase transitions, let's say, for different minerals, and or there's a georeactor and you're having radioactive material break down and produce light elements, that's going to cause a volume expansion. So I think it's certainly possible. But that's beyond our video today. I think there's maybe something to it, but it's not what most of these Earth expansion people think. That's my thoughts. And Tina's asking about this asteroid coming out on the 26th of this month. It's going to be a big asteroid, like 1,000 kilometers across. So it's going to miss us by a big deal, a wide amount. It's not even going to get close to the moon, so I'm not worried about it. Thank you for the super thanks. Beauty's Poet, thank you for the super thanks. And yeah, we have stuff on the website. This is earthevolution.com/store. We have merch, we have tea products, all this and more. You can check it out. We'll be having more merch coming soon. I have a new design I want to make. So keep an eye on that. But everything's perfectly in stock right now. And the big announcement I can give you is that our lapis lazuli crystals are back in stock too. Huge shipment came in from Afghanistan. They're unbelievable quality. So I recommend perhaps that you check that out if you want. But they are fantastic energy, and the stones are super high quality, polished, and more. So these are all available on the website earthevolution.com. store, and they're fantastic. I love them, and I know you'll love them too. We have plenty this time, so they're not going to run out unless you guys go really absolutely nutso. What would you put the odds of a direct hit solar flare that's strong enough to cause widespread blackouts this year? Under 5%. Now, as it relates to early 2027, I think it could be higher than 5%. But in general, the risk is always fairly low, like the absolute risk. So when I'm releasing a video saying, hey, like this thing is now much more possible, I'm talking about the relative risk. But in general, the absolute risk in general is low. But with certain planetary geometry, I think it goes up quite a bit higher. And we were, right on with early January of this year, big solar impact. It just didn't have the magnetic field to trigger a really big event. Instead, Jupiter got the energy, right? It's like perfectly, the structure of it is perfect to give Earth and Jupiter a message from the sun. And I think everything's conscious. So that's, it's very interesting to me. We see another kind of just interesting tidbit there is we see that if we look at the total intercepted power by planets, there's actually a lot of similarity between them. Jupiter gets the most, that's 775 pentawatts. But Mercury, Earth, and Saturn all get similar amounts of energy. And then you see Venus there is actually getting a little bit, it's close to double what Earth is getting. So the planets are much more alive and interacting with each other than most people think. And, most of you already heard my thoughts, in terms of consciousness. I'll leave it at that. But it's very, very interesting. Acid Burn saying, do you know they changed the calendar in 2012? You guys can look into that if you want. And Spray Work, do the odds of a Carrington-like event increase each year? We do not have one. I wouldn't say that, but there does seem to be a bit of a reoccurrence interval with them. So, it just really depends on the solar cycle, and eventually it's going to happen. Eventually it will happen. And Migrating Coconut, thousands of people here. Let's pray for each other for a little bit. Thank you. Dear God, we ask you to bless us all with healing and love and peace and community. Amen. Boom. Done. Love it. Thank you for the reminder. Gang, thank you so much. And last question from Sean. Has this frequency events always been happening, but now we can measure it better? Or is it legit getting crazy? I feel it in my bones. It's more. This is a very special sequence of what we've been having in terms of planetary alignments. It's very special. It's not like we've never had them before, but this one is certainly unique and very special. So, and it kind of comes to a conclusion in 2032. So we'll see. Then we have, it seems like a bit of a gap until 2040 when we have another Jupiter-Saturn conjunction. So we got 6 more years, but we have a little bit of a break until 2032 because 2026 is the big year. We have some other stuff in 2028, whatever, but 2026, 2032, those are the big years. There's always been a lot happening, but certainly special now. I can say that. So that is it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, everybody. I've been your host, Stefan Burns. Who knows what's going to happen at the end of this year, beginning of 2027, and what's going to happen with the 2032 event. But we certainly have the possibility for big solar activity coming up within that time frame, especially 2032, that planetary alignment. Let me show it one more time because this is so crazy. That planetary alignment is very nuts, but it will be kind of out of sync with a solar maximum, which is the preferred part of a solar cycle. Whereas what we have coming up at the end of this year, beginning of 2027, that really looks significant. So again, here is that alignment, really unprecedented. It's better than the Carrington Event alignment because not only now do you get Jupiter there behind the Earth, which we didn't get with the Carrington Event, but you also have Uranus behind Saturn. So just when I'm looking at this planetary alignment here, it looks really significant, like historic, really. And so we'll just have to find out what happens when we get there. So that's it for today. Thank you all. Have a great day, and I'll see you all in the next video.